A metropolis blossoms in the middle of a barren desert. This was not magic, but the result of brilliant, hidden water systems that built the first great cities. Their true foundations were not stone monuments, but intricate networks of canals and underground channels. By the end of this, you will see these ancient urban centers in a completely new light. We will uncover how Persian engineers built tunnels that ran for miles without a single pump, and why a city in the jungle relied on a reservoir the size of a modern lake. What forgotten blueprint from our past could solve a water crisis today? That initial spark of control began with a simple but profound shift in perspective. A river was no longer just a source of water. It was a force to be directed. The earliest farmers living along these fertile banks watched the annual floods with a mixture of hope and dread. The water brought life, but it could also bring destruction, washing away fields or failing to arrive at all. Their survival depended on moving beyond mere reliance. They started small, perhaps with a single ditch dug by hand to lead water from the river to a thirsty field. This was the moment of Genesis. That one ditch was a declaration of intent, a first step toward bending the environment to human will. From these humble beginnings, the scale of water management exploded. Communities realized that by working together, they could build not just ditches, but networks of canals. They could construct reservoirs to hold water through dry seasons. This collective effort required something new, something beyond family ties or village elders. It demanded organization to coordinate the labor of hundreds to design and maintain these expanding systems. A central authority emerged. This is the core of the hydraulic hypothesis, where the control of water and the control of people became intertwined. Leaders, perhaps priests or chieftains, now held the power to allocate water, the very substance of life. This power solidified social hierarchies, creating the administrative structures that would become the backbone of the first states. Nowhere was this relationship more elegantly displayed than in ancient Egypt. The Nile's predictable flood cycle was a gift, depositing rich silt across its valley. But the Egyptians did not just wait for the gift, they built the table upon which it was laid. They constructed vast basin irrigation systems, a series of low walls that captured the floodwaters and held them in place, allowing the water to soak deeply into the soil and deposit its precious silt before being drained away. This human-made control transformed a seasonal event into a year-round agricultural engine, fueling the growth of cities like Memphis and Thebes. The river's natural rhythm was no longer the master, but a partner. This fundamental shift from passive acceptance to active management marks the true beginning of urban civilization. The question then becomes, how did these early engineers move beyond simple canals and basins to create even more sophisticated and enduring water systems? Deep beneath the sun-scorched plains of Persia, a hidden river flowed in silence. This was not a river of nature, but one of human genius, a Kanat. For a city to rise in such an arid landscape, it needed a secret, a lifeline that could not be seen or stolen by the sun. The Kanat was that secret. It began high in the mountains where snowmelt seeped into the ground, filling porous aquifers. Persian engineers did not try to pump this water out. Instead, they tunneled down to meet it. The system was deceptively simple in concept, yet breathtaking in its execution. A mother well was dug deep into the water-bearing layer of the mountain foothills. From there, a gently sloping underground tunnel was carved, just enough for a person to crawl through, stretching for miles toward the settlement and its fields. At regular intervals, vertical shafts were sunk from the surface down to the tunnel, serving dual purposes. They provided air for the diggers and a way to remove the excavated earth. But their most crucial function was as a giant surveying tool. By lining up the tops of these shafts, the builders could maintain the perfect, minuscule slope for the water to flow, unaided, all the way to its destination. The precision required was immense. A slope too steep would cause erosion and collapse the tunnel. A slope too shallow, and the water would stagnate and fail to move. This was engineering by feel and by generations of accumulated wisdom, a knowledge passed from father to son. The result was nothing short of miraculous. Cool, clean water emerged from the ground in the heart of the city or at the edge of farmland, having traveled for miles without evaporating a single drop under the relentless desert sun. This was how Persepolis, a glittering capital of the ancient world, was quenched. It is a legacy that endures. In the city of Gonabad in Iran, a Kanat system first tapped 2,700 years ago still provides water today. For communities to invest so much labor in a project that might take decades to complete, they needed more than just skill. They needed a map not on parchment, but etched into the collective memory and precise measurements of its builders. This invisible cartography, the ability to chart a course for water through solid rock and across vast distances, was the true foundation upon which these desert empires were built. And while the Persians mastered the underground on the other side of the world, another civilization was performing an equally audacious feat of water management, but on a scale so massive it reshaped the very surface of the earth. The blueprint for every aqueduct and Kanat began not on paper, but in the mind. Ancient hydrological engineers possessed a unique form of sight, an ability to visualize the invisible path of water across a landscape. They read the subtle language of the earth, the gentle inclines, the way vegetation grew, the flow of seasonal streams, and translated these clues into a mental map. To make this vision a reality, they employed deceptively simple tools. The chorobates, a long, level wooden bench with water-filled grooves, could detect a slope as slight as 1 part in 1,000. The groma, a cross-shaped instrument with hanging plumb lines, allowed them to sight perfect right angles and straight lines across miles of open terrain. These were the instruments that charted the course for civilization's water. In Mesopotamia, where a single misplaced canal could mean starvation for a city, surveyors used aligned poles to ensure their channels maintained a perfect, gentle gradient. Too steep and the water would rush through, eroding the channel walls. Too shallow and silt would clog the entire system. Their work was a high-stakes balancing act, a marriage of geometry and gut instinct. The resulting map was not a document to be filed away. It was etched into the land itself with marker stones, pilot trenches, and generations of observational data. This was a living cartography, constantly maintained and adjusted. The Romans would later formalize this with detailed cadastral maps on bronze tablets, but the foundational art was perfected by these earlier masters of the land. They were the world's first civil engineers, blending empirical observation with an almost prophetic foresight. Their knowledge was a precious commodity, meticulously passed down through apprenticeships and oral tradition. This legacy of observation and adaptation raises the question of who truly mastered this art. To understand the pinnacle of ancient water management, we must turn to a ruler whose name became synonymous with hydraulic genius. But that mastery over the unseen path of water had to be translated into control on the ground, and nowhere was this more evident than in the land between the rivers. In Mesopotamia, the Tigris and Euphrates did not offer the predictable gift of the Nile. Their floods were violent and capricious, arriving at the wrong time for planting and threatening to wash everything away. To build cities here was an act of sheer defiance. The Sumerian and Akkadian solution was a masterpiece of organization, a vast hierarchical web of waterways etched into the flat, fertile plain. This was not a random collection of ditches. It was a managed system with large primary canals branching into smaller secondary channels, which then fed even smaller tertiary channels that finally delivered water directly to the roots of crops. This entire network functioned like a living circulatory system for the civilization, and like a body, it required constant, careful maintenance. Silt was the eternal enemy. These life-giving rivers also carried immense amounts of sediment that would slowly choke the canals, demanding relentless dredging by armies of laborers. This colossal, coordinated effort gave birth to something beyond engineering, bureaucracy. The world's first administrators emerged to manage the chaos, recording water allocations, repair schedules, and labor quotas on countless clay tablets. In cities like Eridu and the ability to fairly, or sometimes unfairly, distribute water was the ultimate source of power. This control was so central to life that it became codified into law. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest legal documents in existence, contains specific statutes governing water use. If a farmer was careless and let his canal leak, flooding his neighbor's field, he was legally required to compensate him with grain. Water was not just a resource, it was a form of currency and a measure of social order. The success of this hydraulic society demonstrates a profound truth, that environmental challenges can be the very catalyst for monumental innovation. But as we will see, this hard-won control was always fragile, a lesson written not in clay but in salt. While Mesopotamian administrators managed water from the top down, an entirely different model was flourishing in the Indus Valley. Here, in the meticulously planned cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, water management was woven into the very fabric of daily life. Imagine walking down a straight, wide street lined with baked brick houses. Inside nearly every one of those homes, you would find a private bathroom with a drain and access to a freshwater well just a short walk away. This was not a luxury for the elite, it was the standard for an entire civilization, a level of urban sanitation that would not be seen again for thousands of years. The genius of the Indus system was its decentralized yet integrated design. There were no grand, state-controlled irrigation canals dominating the landscape. Instead, the focus was on managing the water that fell from the sky and flowed through the city itself. Every house was connected to a city-wide network of covered drains that ran beneath the streets. These drains were engineered with care, built from standardized bricks and equipped with inspection holes and traps to catch solid waste, preventing blockages. The entire city was gently sloped so that wastewater would flow efficiently away from residential areas and into sumps or out to the surrounding agricultural fields. This was a system that relied on collective responsibility, where the health of the entire community depended on every single household properly maintaining its own connection. At the heart of Mohenjo-Daro stood the Great Bath, a large, watertight tank that likely served a central ritual and social purpose. This structure tells us that for the Indus people, water was not merely a practical resource, it was sacred, a force that connected cleanliness to spiritual and community well-being. The sophistication of their planning is staggering, with evidence of consistent brick sizes, laid-out street grids, and complex water and drainage infrastructure appearing in cities hundreds of miles apart. This points to a shared cultural understanding, a common blueprint for how a civilized society should function. They achieved a remarkable balance, creating a highly organized urban environment without the apparent need for the oppressive, water-controlling bureaucracies of Mesopotamia. Their silent, crumbling ruins pose a powerful question to our modern world of centralized utilities and crumbling infrastructure. What lessons in resilience and community-based management have we forgotten? As this hydraulic knowledge spread and evolved, it would eventually be consolidated into a single, monumental text, a guidebook for empire written by a king who understood that water was the true source of all power. Descending into a stepwell feels like entering a cathedral carved from the earth itself. The air grows cool, the bustling world above fades away, and you are surrounded by a symphony in stone. These are the Baolis of India, masterpieces where architecture did not simply contain water but celebrated it. A stepwell is a reverse temple, its ornate staircases and terraced landings leading you down to the water table, not up toward the heavens. For over 4,000 years, these structures solved a critical problem: the fluctuating groundwater levels of a region defined by monsoons and droughts. Each level of steps ensured that no matter how far the water receded during the dry season, people could always reach it. This was hydrology made tangible, a staircase to survival. But these were never merely functional holes in the ground. They were community centers, cool sanctuaries from the oppressive heat, and sacred spaces adorned with thousands of intricate carvings. The Rani Kai Vav in Gujarat is perhaps the most stunning example, a 7-story deep inverted temple where every surface is covered with detailed sculptures of deities, celestial beings, and geometric patterns. It is a testament to a culture that saw no distinction between the well that quenches your thirst and the art that nourishes your soul. Here, women gathering water would also share news and forge social bonds. Travelers would find rest in the shaded pavilions. Rituals honoring the sacredness of water would be performed on the very steps used to collect it. This seamless fusion of utility and profound beauty stands in stark contrast to our modern world, where water infrastructure is often hidden in sterile pipes and concrete treatment plants. The stepwell asks us a powerful question: why have we separated what the ancients so elegantly combined? This deep cultural integration of water was not unique to India, as the Romans would demonstrate with their own brand of monumental engineering, turning the management of water into a powerful statement of imperial identity. The Romans took the art of water management and scaled it to an imperial level. Their aqueducts were not hidden like the Persian qanats, but were instead bold declarations of power, marching across the landscape on towering arches of stone. Visualize a channel of fresh mountain water flowing purely by gravity, crossing deep valleys on massive bridges to reach the heart of a metropolis. This was engineering as a public spectacle. At its peak, the city of Rome was quenched by 11 separate aqueducts, a network stretching over 500 kilometers that delivered a staggering 1 million cubic meters of water every single day. This water did not just support life, it defined a new standard of living. It cascaded into ornate public fountains, filled the vast pools of monumental bath complexes, and even supplied the private homes of wealthy citizens. The entire system was a testament to a deep understanding of physics. Engineers like Vitruvius meticulously recorded the principles of maintaining a constant, gentle gradient. They used sophisticated inverted siphons to push water across low points, all without a single pump. The Pont du Gard in southern France stands as a breathtaking monument to this expertise. Its 3 tiers of arches built with such precise stonework that very little mortar was needed. This was more than infrastructure, it was an assertion of identity. The public baths these aqueducts supplied were not merely for cleaning oneself. They were the social and cultural hubs of the city, places where business was conducted, politics were discussed, and community was forged. Yet this magnificent system also contained the seeds of its own vulnerability. The very scale that made it impressive also made it fragile. Maintaining hundreds of kilometers of channels and arches required a vast, well-funded, and highly organized administration. What happened when that administration began to falter? The slow decline of the Roman aqueducts, often clogged by mineral deposits and damaged by neglect, would later show just how quickly urban life could retreat when its foundational systems failed. This reliance on colossal, centralized projects stands in stark contrast to another model of water management, one that thrived in the dense jungles of the Americas, where a civilization turned seasonal rains into a permanent empire. Deep within the Cambodian jungle, a reservoir the size of a modern lake was not just a source of water, but the very soul of an empire. The West Barre at Angkor is an astounding feat, a man-made body of water stretching 8 kilometers long and 2.5 kilometers wide. To stand on its banks today is to witness the ambition of the Khmer engineers, who literally moved mountains of earth to create it. This was the central battery in a sprawling hydraulic grid designed to tame the monsoon. For half the year, torrential rains would fall, and this entire network of canals, moats, and smaller reservoirs acted like a giant catchment system, channeling that precious water into the Barre. Then, during the long dry season, the system would reverse. A carefully managed network of channels would release the stored water, distributing it across vast rice paddies to support not one, but multiple harvests each year. This was the engine that powered a city of up to 1 million people, a scale unmatched in the pre-industrial world. The magnificent temples we marvel at today, Angkor Wat and the Bayon, were not isolated sanctuaries. They were the central nodes of this water landscape. Their massive moats were not merely decorative or defensive. They were massive stabilizing reservoirs, regulating the water table and symbolizing the Hindu cosmos, where a temple mountain is surrounded by the world's oceans. The entire city was a conscious reflection of a divine order engineered into reality. Recent LIDAR technology, which uses lasers to see through the dense forest canopy, has revealed the true extent of this achievement. It shows a metropolitan area stretching over hundreds of square kilometers, all crisscrossed by the ghostly imprint of canals and embankments. This was a low-density, sprawling city entirely integrated with its life support system. Yet, this very sophistication may have contained the seeds of its downfall. Such a complex, centralized system was incredibly brittle. It demanded constant, meticulous maintenance. A single failure in a main canal or a silted-up reservoir could cascade through the entire network. Evidence suggests that a series of severe droughts followed by intense monsoons in the 14th century may have overwhelmed the system, causing catastrophic floods and erosion that the engineers could not repair. The story of Angkor is a powerful lesson in the paradox of water management. The same infrastructure that enables a civilization to flourish can also make it profoundly vulnerable to a changing climate. It forces us to ask, how do we build systems that are not just powerful but also resilient? A ruler's legitimacy in ancient China was measured not just in battles won, but in floods averted. This was governance made tangible. The mandate of heaven could be revoked by a single, catastrophic failure of the water system. It was this profound responsibility that gave birth to one of history's most enduring engineering marvels, the Dujiangyan system. On the Min River, a torrent known for its violent and destructive floods, engineers faced a paradox. They needed to divert water for irrigation without building a dam that would silt up and inevitably fail. Their solution was one of breathtaking elegance. Instead of confronting the river's power head-on, they worked with it. They constructed a long, low levee known as the fish mouth, which split the river into two channels. One channel continued as the main flow, while the other was directed toward the fertile Chengdu Plain. Further along, a spillway called the Flying Sand Weir was engineered to allow excess water and, crucially, suspended silt to wash back into the main river, preventing the irrigation canals from clogging. This was not brute force engineering. It was a delicate, persistent dance with the river's own energy, a system designed to self-regulate and self-clean. Completed in the 3rd century BCE, it still functions perfectly today, transforming a region once plagued by drought and flood into a perpetual breadbasket. This philosophy of harmony extended to an even grander scale with the Grand Canal. Beginning over 2,500 years ago, this was not a single project but a centuries-long endeavor, an artificial river stitching together the disparate ecosystems of northern and southern China. It connected the Yellow River with the Yangtze, a watery spine for the empire. The logistical achievement is almost incomprehensible. The canal stretched for nearly 2,000 kilometers, crossing varied terrain and requiring sophisticated lock systems to manage changes in elevation. It was built by millions of conscripted laborers, a mobilization of human effort that speaks to the absolute priority of water management. The Grand Canal did more than just move water. It moved grain, troops, and ideas, binding the empire into a single, integrated economic unit. The capital in the north could now be fed by the rice surpluses of the south. This grand unification through hydraulics created a feedback loop, where control over water reinforced the power of the central state, which in turn undertook ever more ambitious water projects. The underlying principle was clear: work with the landscape, not against it. This stands in stark contrast to the Roman model of imposing order through monumental structures like aqueducts. The Chinese approach sought a subtle, sustainable integration. The endurance of Dujiangyan, still nurturing fields after more than 2,000 years, offers a silent challenge to our own, often confrontational relationship with nature. It makes you wonder, what might our modern infrastructure look like if we valued resilience and harmony as much as raw power and immediate control? The sprawling avenue of the dead at Teotihuacan was more than a ceremonial pathway. It was a hydrological masterstroke. This vast central artery, aligned with celestial precision, also served as the city's main storm drain. When the rains swept across the Mexican highlands, the entire street became a catchment channel, meticulously engineered to divert torrents of water away from the densely packed apartment compounds and into a network of reservoirs and agricultural terraces. This was urban planning on a grand scale, where the flow of water and the movement of the stars were woven into a single, coherent design. Far to the south, in the dense lowland jungles, the Maya faced a different challenge. With few permanent rivers on the surface, their survival depended on capturing every drop of rain. They turned the landscape itself into a sponge. Natural sinkholes, known as cenotes, became sacred wells, while beneath the city plazas, they constructed bottle-shaped underground chambers called choltons, plastered to hold thousands of gallons of rainwater. At the great city of Tikal, the Maya paved their grand plazas not just for ceremony but for utility. These vast stone surfaces were carefully sloped, channeling rainfall through stone-lined conduits into massive subterranean storage tanks. This was a civilization preparing for drought, engineering its public spaces to become a life-saving catchment system. For both the Maya and the people of Teotihuacan, managing water was a sacred covenant. Water was intrinsically linked to the underworld and to concepts of fertility and rebirth. A ruler's power was demonstrated not just in warfare, but in their ability to summon the rains and fill the reservoirs, a divine duty that cemented their authority. The sheer precision of these systems, built without metal tools or the wheel, points to an immense collective effort and a profound, accumulated wisdom passed down through generations. They did not conquer their environment, they conversed with it, tailoring elegant solutions to the specific rhythms of their local ecosystems. In an era of increasing climate uncertainty, their legacy poses a critical question. What lessons in decentralized, nature-integrated resilience have our modern, centralized systems caused us to overlook? This indigenous genius forms a vital and often forgotten chapter in our global water heritage. The Nile's rhythm was not just a cycle of seasons, but the very heartbeat of Egyptian civilization. Each year, the river swelled with the summer rains far to the south, spreading a layer of dark, fertile silt across its floodplain. This was the moment the entire society waited for, but the Egyptians did not simply watch this gift arrive. They built an intricate system to maximize its potential. They transformed the valley into a vast, organized grid of basins using earthen banks. When the floodwaters came, these basins acted like giant, shallow pans, trapping the nutrient-rich water and holding it for weeks, allowing the silt to settle and the soil to drink its fill. Only then were the drains opened, guiding the excess water back to the river channel. This was basin irrigation, a dance of capture and release that turned an annual event into a perpetual agricultural engine. The success of this entire system depended on precise timing and local knowledge. Officials known as scribes monitored the rising waters using structures called nilometers. These were often stone staircases leading down into the river, marked with measurements that indicated the height of the flood. A reading that was too low meant famine was likely, as the water would not reach all the fields. A reading that was too high signaled potential destruction, with villages and canals at risk of being washed away. The data collected from these nilometers allowed the central administration to predict the harvest, plan labor, and distribute resources. This was governance by hydrology. The predictable surplus of food grown in these watered basins freed up a massive labor force, a workforce that could be directed to build the pyramids at Giza and the temples at Karnak. The river's consistency enabled a stability that lasted for 3,000 years. To push cultivation further from the river's edge, the Egyptians became master canal builders. They dug channels that snaked out into the desert fringes, bringing life to new lands, and to lift water from these canals to the higher fields, they employed a simple yet brilliant device, the shaduf. A shaduf is a long pole balanced on a crossbeam with a counterweight on one end and a bucket on the other. A farmer could pull the bucket down into the water, and the counterweight would make it easy to lift it, swinging the full bucket over to irrigate the field. This technology, repeated thousands of times along the riverbank, was the final link in the chain, allowing every possible patch of soil to be cultivated. But the Nile was far more than a physical resource, it was a divine force. The god Hapi was the personification of the annual flood, a generous deity who brought fertility and abundance. This intimate, sacred relationship with their river shaped the Egyptian worldview, fostering a culture deeply rooted in cyclical renewal and cosmic order. The pharaoh himself was seen as the intermediary who ensured the flood's arrival, his authority inextricably tied to the river's bounty. This profound connection raises a compelling question about our own era of complex dams and pipelines. In our quest to control water, have we lost the sense of reverence that allowed civilizations like Egypt to thrive for millennia? In the vast, silent deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, the line between life and death was measured in water. Here, a hidden pulse beat beneath the sands, a secret network of channels known as the Falaj. Much like the Persian Kanat, this was a system of genius, born from an intimate understanding of a merciless landscape. It began in the distant Hajar Mountains, where rare rainfall would seep into the ground, collecting in hidden aquifers. The Falaj was a subterranean highway built to intercept this treasure. Skilled diggers would tunnel back from a planned oasis, carving a gently sloping channel deep underground with periodic vertical shafts for air and excavation. The goal was to guide this captured groundwater purely by gravity to the very heart of the desert. The moment this water emerged into the sunlight, it created an oasis, a sudden explosion of green where date palms, fruit trees, and fodder crops could flourish. This was not a miracle, it was meticulous engineering. Settlements like Al Ain were not accidents of geography. They were deliberate creations, founded precisely where a Falaj channel broke the surface. These lush, shaded havens became the anchors of civilization in an otherwise impassable sea of sand. Their strategic importance extended far beyond their immediate gardens. They became the essential way stations for the great caravan trade routes, the lifeblood of the region's economy. Camels carrying frankincense, myrrh, and spices could only make their epic journeys across the desert if there were guaranteed sources of water and food along the way. The Falaj did not just grow dates, it grew commerce and connected continents. The survival of this entire system depended on a delicate social contract. Maintaining the underground channels, clearing silt, and repairing collapses was a constant communal effort. Water shares were allocated not by wealth, but by a complex and deeply ingrained custom, often measured by the time a farmer was allowed to divert flow to his fields. A sundial or a simple water clock might be used to ensure fairness, with each family's turn calculated down to the minute. This fostered a powerful sense of collective ownership and mutual responsibility, where the well-being of one was tied to the well-being of all. The knowledge required to manage this was immense, a deep wisdom of geology and hydrology that was passed down orally from one generation of Falaj masters to the next. They knew how to read the land, where to dig, and how to maintain the precious gradient. This legacy is not entirely lost. In Oman and the UAE, some of these ancient Falaj systems, some over 2,000 years old, still deliver water to farms and villages today. They stand as a timeless testament to a sustainable model of water use, one that worked in harmony with a harsh environment rather than seeking to dominate it. This intricate relationship between water, community, and trade raises a profound question for our own times. As we face growing water scarcity, what can we learn from these ancient societies that turned collective survival into a durable art form? Even as Rome's aqueducts fell silent, the engineering knowledge they represented did not vanish. It was preserved and refined within the walls of a new imperial capital, Constantinople. Here, the Byzantines faced a constant threat of siege, making a secure water supply a matter of survival. Their solution was not just to bring water in, but to hide it underground. They constructed vast, cathedral-like cisterns beneath the city streets, the most famous being the Basilica cistern. Supported by a forest of recycled marble columns, this subterranean palace could hold 80,000 cubic meters of water, enough to sustain the city for months. Walking through it was an eerie experience, the stillness broken only by dripping water and the ghosts of empires past, a secret sea buried in the city's foundations. This was defensive hydrology, a brilliant adaptation that turned vulnerability into resilience. Meanwhile, a new force was rising in the east, one that would not only preserve ancient techniques but propel them to new heights. Islamic engineers became the great synthesizers of the hydraulic world, studying and improving upon the qanats of Persia and the aqueducts of Rome. In cities like Hama on the Orontes River, they built monumental norias, giant water wheels powered solely by the current of the river itself. These creaking wooden giants, some over 20 meters in diameter, lifted water high into aqueducts that fed the city and its lush gardens. Their endless, rhythmic motion was the sound of a city thriving, a perfect marriage of simple physics and grand ambition. This intellectual curiosity was formalized by scholars like Al-Jazari, whose book of knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices meticulously detailed designs for water-raising machines, water clocks, and automated fountains. His work was a fusion of art, science, and engineering, illustrating a culture that saw water management as a noble pursuit. In the bustling metropolises of Baghdad and Damascus, water was woven into the fabric of daily life and faith. Elaborate public bathhouses served as social centers, while countless fountains provided drinking water and a sense of communal beauty. Sophisticated sewerage and drainage systems reflected the cultural emphasis on cleanliness, which was both a practical concern and a spiritual obligation. This integration reached its aesthetic peak in the Islamic garden, a walled paradise where water was the central design element. Canals and fountains symbolized the four rivers of paradise, offering a cool, reflective oasis that embodied a harmonious balance between human intellect and divine creation. The flourishing of these cities was a direct result of this hydraulic synthesis. It prompts a vital question: how many of our own modern advancements are built upon the forgotten crossroads of knowledge, where one civilization's decline simply passed the torch to another's brilliant ascent? The steady, rhythmic groan of a turning water wheel was the sound of a continent awakening. Across the valleys and forests of medieval Europe, this sound signaled a quiet revolution, one where the energy of a flowing stream could be harnessed to do the work of dozens of men or animals. This was the era of the watermill, a technology that fundamentally reshaped both the landscape and the economy. From the 10th century onward, these structures became ubiquitous, their primary task being the grinding of grain. What had once been back-breaking labor for countless individuals, pounding grain with hand-held stones, was now automated by the relentless power of water. But the mill's utility did not stop at flour. Its versatile power was soon adapted for other industries. The heavy wooden hammers of a fulling mill pounded and felted woolen cloth, a process essential for creating durable textiles. In smithies, massive trip hammers powered by waterwheel arms forged metal, shaping tools and weapons with a consistency human muscles could never achieve. This was the first wave of industrial automation, and it was all driven by water. At the forefront of this technological adoption were often the monasteries. These self-sufficient religious communities were not just spiritual centers but also hubs of practical innovation. They possessed the land, the resources, and the organizational structure to build and maintain complex mill systems. A monastery's mill was a vital economic engine, processing its own vast grain harvests and also serving the surrounding population for a fee, generating crucial income. The scale of this transformation is captured in a single, remarkable document, the Domesday Book. Compiled in the 11th century, this great survey of England records the existence of over 6,000 watermills. That is one mill for every few hundred people, a staggering density that reveals just how central this technology had become to daily life and the feudal economy. Each one of these mills was more than just a building with a wheel. It was a carefully managed hydrological system. To ensure a consistent and powerful flow of water, millers constructed leats, which were artificial channels diverting water from a river to their wheel. They built small dams known as mill ponds to create a reserve of water, and they used sluice gates with precise wooden mechanisms to control the release of that water onto the wheel itself. This localized control over a waterway was a form of micro-engineering that mirrored, on a smaller scale, the grand hydrological management of ancient empires. The mechanical demands of transferring the wheel's power drove significant innovation in gear systems. craftsmen perfected the design of wooden gears with precisely carved teeth that could translate the horizontal rotation of the water wheel into the vertical rotation needed to turn a millstone. This growing expertise in transmitting and transforming force laid the essential mechanical groundwork for the machines of the later Industrial Revolution. Beyond their pure mechanical function, mills became vital social hubs. The mill was a place where people gathered while waiting for their grain to be ground, a place to exchange news, conduct business, and forge community ties. Ownership of a mill conferred immense social power and wealth, often becoming a contentious source of feudal rights and disputes. The proliferation of these structures physically altered the European landscape, etching a new network of mill races and ponds into the countryside. It prompts a powerful reflection on our own time. This medieval shift from muscle power to water power demonstrates how a new energy source can fundamentally redefine a society's capabilities and its very structure, a theme that resonates deeply in our modern debates over renewable energy and the future of power. High in the Andes, the Inca did not just build on mountains, they redesigned them. Their solution to farming precipitous slopes was a masterpiece of landscape engineering, the terrace. These were not simple steps cut into the hillside. Each terrace was a complex, layered structure. A stone retaining wall held back the earth, and beneath the soil, layers of gravel and sand acted as a natural drainage system, preventing the fields from becoming waterlogged during heavy rains. This entire network was fed by canals that snaked along the contours of the mountains, capturing meltwater from glaciers high above. The Inca understood gravity with an intuitive genius, using it to guide water from one terrace to the next through carefully placed stone channels. This system turned barren, erosion-prone slopes into fertile fields for maize, potatoes, and quinoa, supporting a vast empire. At Machu Picchu, this philosophy reached its zenith. A natural spring on the mountain peak was the city's only source of water. Inca engineers built a long, stone-cut canal with just the right slope to carry that water to the center of the settlement. There, a series of 16 ceremonial fountains cascaded through the city, each one channeling water to the next in a seamless flow that served both practical and spiritual needs. The entire city was also designed with drainage in mind, with subterranean channels ensuring that even during torrential downpours, the plazas and homes remained dry. This was not an attempt to conquer nature, but a profound collaboration with it. Far to the north, in the blistering heat of the Sonoran Desert, another culture performed a similar miracle. The Hohokam people looked at a landscape that received less than 10 inches of rain a year and saw potential. Starting over 1,000 years ago, they began digging, eventually creating a canal network so extensive that its main branches stretched over 500 miles, a web of waterways that put water from the Salt and Gila rivers to work. The scale is almost impossible to grasp. These were not small ditches. Some of the main canals were 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep, dug entirely with stone tools and baskets. This hydraulic grid transformed the desert into a flourishing agricultural heartland, supporting a population of 40 to 50,000 people in a series of villages, including what would become the city of Phoenix. They were master hydrologists, understanding how to maintain the perfect gradient for water flow over long distances and how to construct headgates and weirs to control it. The survival of these civilizations hinged on knowledge that was accumulated over centuries, a deep, localized understanding of hydrology, geology, and ecology passed down through generations. And then, with devastating speed, much of that knowledge vanished. The twin cataclysms of European colonization and introduced diseases shattered these societies. Populations collapsed, social structures disintegrated, and the vast, labor-intensive canal networks and terraces fell into disrepair and were slowly reclaimed by the desert and the forest. For centuries, this hydraulic genius was forgotten, its remnants often dismissed as the work of primitive peoples. Modern archaeology, using tools like LIDAR and soil analysis, is only now beginning to reconstruct the true scale and sophistication of these systems. Each discovery chips away at outdated stereotypes, revealing a legacy of American innovation that stands shoulder to shoulder with the aqueducts of Rome and the qanats of Persia. This loss forces us to confront a difficult truth. Knowledge, even the most vital and hard one, is fragile. It can be erased not by a natural disaster, but by a historical one. The rediscovery of these lost waterways is more than an academic exercise. It is a lesson in resilience, showing how cultures can thrive in the most challenging environments through careful observation and adaptation. And it is an urgent reminder of the profound importance of preserving diverse traditions of knowledge, especially as we now face our own escalating water crises. The secrets of the earth held a different kind of map, one written not on parchment but in the subtle language of the land itself. Ancient prospectors searching for water read these signs with an expert eye. They knew that a line of particularly lush green vegetation in an otherwise dry area often pointed to a hidden stream flowing just beneath the surface. They watched where certain animals dug for moisture or the direction birds flew at dusk, seeing them as living guides to underground reservoirs. The presence of specific rock formations could signal a natural barrier that trapped water in the soil, creating a potential aquifer. This was the foundational science of hydrology, built over generations through meticulous observation and painful trial and error. In many cultures, this search was aided by the practice of dowsing, where a practitioner would walk the land holding a forked stick, believing it would twitch or dip when over hidden water. While the scientific validity of dowsing remains hotly debated, its historical prevalence speaks to the immense cultural importance of locating this invisible resource. Far more reliable was the sheer, back-breaking labor of digging a well. At Mohenjo-Daro, the Great Well plunges over 100 feet down, a monumental shaft lined with precisely engineered bricks to prevent collapse. This was not a solitary effort, but a massive communal undertaking to tap directly into the lifeblood of the aquifer. This growing empirical knowledge fundamentally reshaped human geography. A settlement was no longer chained to the bank of a river. A community could now venture inland, sinking wells into the earth to draw forth a constant, reliable supply. This understanding of groundwater unlocked entire regions for habitation, pushing the frontiers of civilization into previously marginal environments. The Nabateans, in their rock-carved capital of Petra, became the ultimate masters of this principle. In a landscape defined by aridity, they did not just find water, they captured every conceivable drop. They chiseled vast cisterns into the solid rock cliffs to store scarce rainwater, and they engineered an intricate system of dams and channels to divert the destructive power of occasional flash floods, spreading the water across their agricultural fields and replenishing their hidden reserves. They turned a desert wadi into a permanent, thriving oasis, a crossroads for caravan routes precisely because they alone had mastered the hidden hydrology of their land. This deep, localized knowledge of groundwater did not just create cities, it forged empires of trade, connecting continents through networks of wells and springs that only the initiated could reliably find and maintain. A city's walls could be thick, its army brave, but without water, its fate was sealed. This brutal reality turned rivers, wells, and aqueducts into strategic military objectives. The Assyrian Empire perfected this form of warfare, systematically dismantling the water infrastructure of any city that dared to rebel. They did not just blockade a city, they shattered its qanats, filled in its wells, and poisoned its springs, transforming a thriving urban center into a desperate, thirst-crazed prison. The goal was not just conquest, but a terrifying lesson in the absolute nature of their power. The Romans, masters of hydraulic engineering, understood this leverage perfectly. When dealing with a defiant city, their diplomats would often point quite literally to the soaring arches of the local aqueduct. The unspoken threat was clear: we built this and we can break it. The mere presence of a Roman legion near an aqueduct's vulnerable upstream course was often enough to force a surrender without a single sword being drawn. In the medieval world, castle design reflected this existential fear. The most important structure within any fortress was not the great hall or the armory, but the well, a deep, protected shaft dug deep into the bedrock within the inner courtyard. A castle with a secure water source could withstand a siege for months, grinding an invading army down through attrition. Conversely, the ability to divert a stream that supplied a castle or to secretly contaminate its cistern was a devastating tactic. During the Crusades, the arid landscape of the Holy Land made every spring and cistern a contested treasure. Armies marched not just toward enemy strongholds, but toward the oases that sustained them. Victory or defeat could hinge on which side controlled a single, crucial well along a desert route. This martial history reveals a dark truth. The very systems designed to give life could be perverted into the most efficient tools for taking it. A poisoned aquifer could accomplish what 1,000 soldiers might not, forcing a population's submission by attacking its most basic biological need. This dual nature of water as both sustainer and weapon has not faded with time. Modern conflicts continue to revolve around these same ancient pressures, from dams targeted in regional wars to disputes over transnational rivers that fuel geopolitical tension. The history of water in warfare is not a relic. It is a recurring lesson that the control of water remains the ultimate form of power, a fundamental geopolitical factor as true today as it was on the plains of ancient Assyria. A gentle, continuous murmur of water has long been the soundtrack of serene and powerful places alike. This was the sound of aesthetics woven into utility, a deliberate choice to make water not just a servant but a centerpiece. In the heart of a bustling medieval city, the public fountain was far more than a source of drinking water. It was a landmark, a social hub, and a canvas for civic pride. Carved from stone and often adorned with allegorical figures or heraldic symbols, these fountains turned a practical necessity into a communal event. People gathered here to collect water, to exchange news, to see and be seen. The very presence of an ornate fountain announced that a city was not merely surviving, but thriving, with enough surplus wealth and skill to celebrate the water that sustained it. This artistic expression was deeply intertwined with urban planning, as these fountains were strategically placed in central piazzas, physically and symbolically anchoring the daily life of the city. Yet this beauty also reinforced social divides. While the public enjoyed the shared fountain, the elite demonstrated their status through private access. Behind the high walls of a palazzo or a monastery, secluded gardens featured their own elaborate water features, from bubbling grottos to delicate cascades. These were exclusive oases of cool and quiet, tangible proof that one had transcended the need for public utilities. This duality was perhaps most elegantly resolved in the Islamic world, where water's beauty was considered a spiritual right. The Alhambra Palace in Spain is a masterclass in this philosophy. Here, water is an essential architectural element, narrow channels guide it along walkways, shallow pools reflect the intricate arches of the courtyards, and fountains release a constant, soothing whisper that cools the air and calms the mind. This was not mere decoration, it was a multisensory engineering feat designed to create a paradise on Earth. The design drew from a profound cultural blueprint, the Persian Chahar Bagh, or four-part garden. In these formal gardens, two intersecting channels of water divided the space into four quadrants, symbolizing the four rivers of life described in the Quran. This geometric precision, with water as its central axis, created a powerful sense of harmony, order, and divine connection. It was a sacred geometry made liquid. These aesthetic principles were not confined to the East. Renaissance Europe enthusiastically embraced the idea of water as spectacle. Popes and princes competed to build the most dramatic fountains, turning water pressure into public theater. The Trevi Fountain in Rome, though completed later, is the ultimate expression of this ambition, a roaring, monumental cascade of sculpted marble and mythic figures that completely dominates its square. This was power made visible and audible. The integration of water into daily life in these ways fundamentally shaped the human experience of the city. It provided visual delight, auditory comfort, and a cooling microclimate. It created natural gathering places that fostered community and offered moments of reflection. This historical lesson is strikingly relevant today, as modern urban planners rediscover the value of blue-green infrastructure. We are once again learning that a city's resilience and character are not just found in its pipes and treatment plants, but in its public pools, its restored urban streams, and its accessible water features that invite people to connect with the element that made urban life possible in the first place. Even the most brilliant water systems carried within them the seeds of their own demise. The story of their decline is rarely one of a single cataclysmic event, but a slow, creeping failure. In Mesopotamia, the very irrigation that built the civilization became its poison. For centuries, the network of canals delivered life-giving water to the fields, but without sufficient drainage, that water lingered in the soil. Under the intense sun, it evaporated, leaving behind a toxic residue of salt. Slowly, year after year, the salt accumulated until the land itself turned white and barren. Crop yields plummeted. Tablets from the time lament the transformation of once fertile fields into land that would not grow lettuce. This was salinization, a silent, insidious enemy that eroded the agricultural foundation of entire city-states, weakening them from within. The Roman aqueducts faced a different fate. Their magnificent flow did not suddenly stop, it gradually slowed to a trickle. The empire's collapse meant the end of the vast, centralized administration that funded teams of skilled workers to constantly scour silt and repair cracks. Without that coordinated effort, the channels clogged with mineral deposits, arches crumbled. The knowledge of how to maintain them was lost to local communities who lacked the resources for such monumental tasks. The great baths fell silent, and the fountains dried up, not with a bang but with the quiet drip of neglect. In the Americas, the challenges were often environmental. At Angkor, the magnificent hydraulic grid was a masterpiece of balance, but that balance was fragile. Extensive deforestation in the uplands, possibly to support the growing city and its construction projects, led to devastating erosion. When the monsoons came, this loose soil washed down, choking the intricate canals and reservoirs with silt. This made the system far more vulnerable to the extreme droughts and floods that climate shifts brought in the 14th century. A political system distracted by court intrigue or external threats may have been unable to muster the massive labor force needed to dredge and repair the damage. The system that had created a metropolis was ultimately overwhelmed by a cascade of interconnected problems. These historical collapses share a common thread, a failure to anticipate long-term consequences. They teach us that no technology, no matter how advanced, is immune to the slow pressures of environmental change, political fragmentation, or simple neglect. The water that built empires could also unmake them, a sobering reminder for our own age of sprawling cities and complex infrastructure. The silent jungles of Cambodia and the dense forests of Central America have begun to speak, revealing secrets hidden for centuries. Modern archaeology is no longer just about trowels and brushes, it is about lasers from the sky. LIDAR technology works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft toward the ground. The ones that slip through the gaps in the canopy bounce back, creating a detailed, three-dimensional map of the bare earth beneath the trees. This is like peeling back a green blanket to see the ghostly imprint of an entire civilization etched into the landscape. At Angkor, LIDAR did not just confirm the existence of known temples. It revealed a vast, low-density metropolis crisscrossed by hundreds of kilometers of canals, roads, and embankments that were completely invisible from the ground. The city was at least 3 times larger than previously thought, a sprawling hydraulic grid integrated with every facet of life. Similarly, in the Maya lowlands, these laser maps have overturned the old image of isolated ceremonial centers. They show that the Maya transformed vast areas of seasonal swamp, known as bojos, into intricate networks of canals and raised fields. They were not just surviving in the jungle, they were actively re-engineering it on an almost industrial scale to feed their populous cities. This is not merely finding lost structures, it is fundamentally rewriting the story of what these societies could achieve. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery add further layers to this new map. These tools can detect subtle variations in soil moisture and density, revealing the outlines of buried canals or the foundations of ancient sluice gates without ever breaking the ground. The true power emerges when this physical data is woven together with other threads of evidence. By combining LIDAR maps with core samples from ancient reservoirs, scientists can analyze sediment layers to understand periods of drought and flood. They can then cross-reference this with tree ring data and inscriptions on temple walls that record historical events. This creates a multidimensional picture, allowing us to see not just what was built, but how the entire system responded to climate stress and political change over centuries. We are no longer looking at static ruins, but at a dynamic, interacting system. The scale and precision revealed force us to abandon outdated notions of pre-industrial societies as primitive. These were sophisticated civilizations with a deep, empirical understanding of their environment, capable of landscape engineering that rivals our own. How many more of these hidden hydrological blueprints are waiting to be read? Each new scan, each new map, adds another piece to a global puzzle, proving that the foundations of our urban past are still very much alive, just waiting for the right technology to bring them back into the light. The wisdom of these ancient waterways is flowing back into our modern cities. We are rediscovering that the solutions to our current water crises may have been etched into the land thousands of years ago. The core principles of ancient hydraulics, gravity-fed distribution, rainwater harvesting, and groundwater recharge are being revived as pillars of sustainable design. In place of energy-hungry pumps and massive concrete conduits, engineers are looking back to simpler, more elegant models. Cities like Portland, Oregon, are pioneering this shift with green infrastructure. They are replacing impermeable asphalt with bioswales, which are landscape channels that capture stormwater and allow it to soak back into the earth. This technique directly mirrors the engineered plaza of a Maya city, where stone surfaces were sloped to channel rain into underground storage. recharging the aquifer instead of creating wasteful runoff. In arid regions, the Kanat is having a quiet renaissance. Researchers are studying these underground channels for their brilliant, low-energy efficiency as they move water for miles without a single pump, relying solely on gravity. This ancient approach offers a powerful alternative to the massive energy costs of modern desalination and long-distance pumping. Similarly, the indigenous practice of contour terracing, perfected by the Inca, is now informing soil conservation and water retention projects in hilly agricultural lands around the world. These are not nostalgic recreations but intelligent adaptations of proven systems. They share a common philosophy: work with the local environment rather than forcing a one-size-fits-all technological fix. So what stops us from embracing these time-tested methods more broadly? The barriers are often our own modern paradigms: entrenched infrastructure, short-term economic calculations, and a reliance on centralized, high-energy systems. The resurgence of interest in ancient hydraulics signals a profound shift in thinking. It highlights a growing recognition that the past holds a deep library of innovation, a catalog of resilient strategies that can help us navigate the escalating challenges of climate change, water scarcity, and urban density. That ancient understanding of water as a shared trust was once written into law. The Code of Hammurabi carved into stone the consequences for a farmer whose negligence flooded a neighbor's field, establishing a clear principle of communal responsibility. This concept of water justice was refined over centuries. In the Islamic world, water law was built upon the idea of Sharia, which often framed water as a common good, a resource that could not be owned but only used responsibly. These legal systems contained sophisticated rules to prevent hoarding by upstream users, ensuring that downstream communities, often the most vulnerable, retained their right to the life-giving flow. This was an ethical framework designed for survival, recognizing that unfair water distribution could shatter the social order itself. Compare this to modern scenarios where the control of water sources has been transferred to private corporations. In some cases, this has led to dramatic price increases, placing a basic necessity out of reach for the poorest residents and sparking widespread social unrest. The fundamental question these conflicts raise is whether water is a commodity to be sold or a human right to be protected. The historical precedent suggests that when a society treats water purely as an economic asset, it risks creating a profound and dangerous inequity. How do we balance the need for efficient, well-maintained systems with the moral imperative of universal access? The answers may lie in those ancient models of community management. The enduring Falaj systems of Oman, for instance, have operated for millennia not through corporate ownership, but through a complex, custom-based allocation of water shares, meticulously measured by time and supervised by a locally appointed guardian. This system works because everyone has a stake in its survival and a voice in its operation. It is a form of governance that embeds sustainability and equity into its very design. Our current water crises are not merely technical problems to be solved with bigger pipes or more powerful pumps. They are, at their core, challenges of governance and ethics. The ancient world reminds us that any lasting solution must be rooted in a simple, powerful idea that water belongs to everyone and its management must serve the entire community, not just the highest bidder. We can now run rivers through silicon landscapes, watching ancient currents flow once more. Digital modeling allows researchers to reconstruct entire water systems inside a computer, creating virtual environments where history becomes a dynamic experiment. Using computational fluid dynamics, engineers can simulate the precise flow of water through a Roman aqueduct, testing how it handled sediment where pressure built up and how efficiently it delivered its vital cargo. This is more than a digital museum piece. It is a working laboratory of the past. The ornate carvings of an Indian stepwell can be digitally rebuilt in 3 dimensions, allowing us to virtually descend its stairs and see its intricate sculptures not as ruins, but bathed in the light and shadow of their original glory. These tools are revolutionizing preservation, creating perfect digital records of sites threatened by time, climate, and human encroachment. But their true power lies in experimental archaeology. For the first time, we can ask what if. What if a severe drought struck the Angkorian hydraulic grid? A digital model can simulate that stress, revealing which reservoirs would fail first and how the entire network might have collapsed. What if a main canal in Mesopotamia was breached? The simulation can show the path of the destructive flood. This allows us to test long-held hypotheses about ancient engineering decisions without ever touching a fragile stone. This digital exploration is also becoming a collective endeavor. Crowdsourced mapping projects invite people worldwide to scan satellite images, helping archaeologists identify the faint, ghostly traces of lost canals and reservoirs. A person sitting at their kitchen table can now contribute to the rediscovery of a civilization's foundational system, transforming the public from passive observers into active participants in the story. So what new insights might emerge as we continue to map the unseen with these tools? The fusion of cutting-edge technology and ancient historiography is just beginning to unlock the secrets of our aquatic past, promising to reveal the hidden logic of lost waterways for generations to come. A city's water system was its economic circulatory system, pulsing with the lifeblood of commerce. The very canals that irrigated fields often doubled as highways for merchant barges, carrying grain, pottery, and textiles from the hinterlands to urban markets. This was the seamless connection between hydraulics and economics, where the control of water flow directly translated into the control of trade flow. Nowhere is this more evident than with China's Grand Canal, an artificial river that did more than just move water, it moved empires. By linking the fertile rice paddies of the south to the political capitals of the north, the canal allowed the state to tax and redistribute immense agricultural surpluses. A single shipment of grain from the south could feed the imperial court and its massive armies, stabilizing the realm. This was not just logistics, it was a form of governance by barge, where economic unity was quite literally floated on a human-made waterway. Port cities were the vital nodes in this global network. Think of a place like Venice, a city that should not exist. Built on a swampy lagoon, its founders saw not an obstacle but an opportunity. They managed the tricky waters, building on wooden pilings and controlling the tidal flows to create a sheltered harbor that became the gateway between Europe and the East. The Venetian fortune was not dug from a mine, it was dredged from a lagoon. Their mastery over their aquatic environment allowed them to build a naval empire that dominated Mediterranean trade for centuries. The same principle applied to inland river ports. A town situated at the confluence of 2 major rivers, or at the highest point a seagoing vessel could sail, naturally became a bustling exchange point. Goods were unloaded, taxes were collected, and markets sprang up, all because of a strategic spot on the water map. This relationship worked in both directions. The wealth generated by trade could then be reinvested into even more sophisticated water infrastructure. A prosperous trading city could afford to build new quays, deeper canals, and larger warehouses, further cementing its commercial dominance. This cycle of water enabling trade and trade funding waterworks propelled urban growth. Consider the Indus Valley civilization's extensive trade with Mesopotamia, which saw cargoes of ivory, timber, and precious stones traveling across the sea. That trade was only possible because the Indus cities, like Mohenjo-Daro, had such a reliable and well-managed water supply that they could produce a consistent agricultural surplus. This surplus freed a significant part of the population from farming, allowing them to specialize as artisans, traders, and sailors. The city's thriving bead-making industry or its export of cotton textiles were direct products of its hydraulic stability. The economic landscape of the ancient world was therefore shaped by its water landscape. A river was not just a source of water, but a customs border, a trade route, and a determinant of a city's destiny. This deep historical entanglement between water and commerce forces a poignant reflection on our own time. In an era of global shipping lanes and container ports, have we truly escaped the ancient rule that economic power still follows the path of water? From the hidden qanats of Persia to the soaring aqueducts of Rome, our journey reveals a profound truth. The lost water systems that built the first great cities were far more than mere infrastructure. They were breathtaking marvels of innovation, testaments to sustainable design, and the very bedrock of complex social organization. This exploration teaches us that the rise of urbanization has always been inextricably linked to the wise and careful management of water. It is a lesson that echoes with urgent relevance in our own era of climate uncertainty and growing resource scarcity. By mapping these ancient networks, we do more than just uncover the secrets of the past. We find a deep well of inspiration for our future. We see the value in low-tech, gravity-fed solutions that work in harmony with the environment. We rediscover ethical frameworks for sharing water as a common good, not a private commodity. The fundamental challenges of water management are timeless, bridging the millennia between the Babylonian canal digger and the modern city planner. The ingenuity of our ancestors, etched into the landscape and rediscovered through laser and satellite, offers a powerful guide forward. It invites us to look at our own community's water systems, to ask how they compare to these resilient ancient models. What can we learn from the stepwells that married utility with beauty, or the Falaj systems that thrived on communal responsibility? Your own observations are a part of this ongoing story. I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden currents of history, subscribe for more journeys into the secrets of our shared past.